We left Antigua hoping to avoid the heavy traffic near Guatemala City. We had been warned by friends that it could take hours to get through those couple of dozen miles on the northern edge of town, so we were on the road by 6 a.m. That apparently still wasn't early enough. It isn't so much the bumper-to-bumper traffic or the constant side streets merging into the main road that made this drive hair-raising. It is rather the huge number of scooters and motorcycles constantly splitting lanes that made this leg of our drive nerve-wracking. When we finally made it through and began heading north towards the city of Coban, the buildings disappeared and the mountains and trees replaced them. As we started to descend in elevation, the temperature began to steadily rise. This is what we've been avoiding ever since we left the Pacific coast more than 2 months ago. But we knew this was unavoidable in order for us to get to the Yucatan Peninsula. If we're going to be camping in the heat, we will need some kind of body of water nearby. We found exactly that here at El Refugio, a jungle paradise an hour north of Coban. So we're in a whole different part of Guatemala now. We left Antigua this morning. Actually, we left Ciudad Vieja, which is a little suburb to the southwest of Antigua. We were in Antigua for a total of like 22 days, I think. We decided to leave. We liked Antigua. In fact, we liked it a lot. There are a couple things that are not ideal for us. One is the garden place that we stayed at for 6 days decided to change their pricing. They used to be 100 quetzales a night, regardless of how many people you have. And they bumped it up to, I think, 150, which is fine, still reasonable. But then they also decided to charge per person after 2 people. So our price would have been $225, which is not worth it to us. They don't have a real bathroom. There's no electricity, cold water, just one toilet. And they're at the most, I think, we had as many as like 20 people there, so that's just not enough. You just saw people constantly walk into the toilet, lying waiting outside. So it's not a real campground for them to want to charge real campground prices. Location though is pretty ideal. A lot of things that you want to see in Central America, Antigua is kind of the place to see it all. So this last week we were there. We got an Airbnb on the outskirts. It was actually pretty cheap. I think we paid like 40 bucks a night, and it was like a 3-bedroom place, gated secure complex with a swimming pool. We were there to catch up on school. The school year is ending and Ava has some work to do, some tests to take, so we took care of a lot of that. We went there to catch up on videos, catch up on my work, just do a lot of sort of general housekeeping stuff, and we're glad we got that done. We didn't actually leave the Airbnb at all this whole week when we were there. And while we were there, we also decided that we are going to fly back to the US for a couple months from Cancun, Mexico, which means from Antigua we got to drive all the way up through the northern part of Guatemala, which is, we're about halfway through that drive right now, and drive through Belize, because once you get to northern Guatemala, you can't actually get to Mexico directly through the north part without going through Belize, which is fine because we haven't actually been to Belize yet, and this will give us a reason to go to Belize. And the reason why we're going to Cancun is it's right now the beginning of June. We have to be in California in the middle of August, and that is because Marlene's parents have a 50th anniversary, and they want us to be there. They want to take their kids and their kids' families, to do something fun for a week. So it's their 50th, it's a big one. They want us to be there. Because we have to be there in August, we have to figure out ahead of time where we're going to be so we can book tickets, store the van, fly from some city, figure out what to do with the cats. It's a whole thing. It's a big ordeal. And the further south you go in Central America, the harder they scrutinize pets when you fly with them. Mostly for rabies and for other infectious diseases. Mexico to the US is very easy. People do it all the time. Mexico has a pretty low incident rate of rabies these days, so the US is pretty relaxed about that. In Guatemala, on the other hand, is a different story. You have to go through a big inspection certification process to get from Guatemala, put the cats on the plane and fly back. And not to even mention that it's way more expensive. So to fly from Cancun seems the best idea for us, 1 for cost and 2 for cats. But the trouble arises because if we have to be there in August and we want to come back at the beginning of September, we can't actually come back to Guatemala after we leave Guatemala for 90 days. So Guatemala's tourist visa indicates that you can be here for 90 days. In fact, that 90 days applies to the 4 Central American countries that are in kind of an alliance. That's Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. This same visa lets you travel, lets you be in these 4 countries for a total of 90 consecutive days. And if you leave these 4 countries and you want to come back, you have to wait 90 days before you can come back. So that means if we go to Mexico and then we try to come back to Guatemala in less than 90 days, they won't let us. So that got us thinking, if we have to be gone and it's kind of hot, it's summer, Cancun is not really where we want to be camping if we're going to go, and we don't really want to stay in an Airbnb the whole time, we'll have to fly there anyways. Maybe we fly early. we go back to California. We spent a couple months meandering the western states once again, and then go to our thing in August, come back in September to Cancun, and by the time we get back, we would have been gone from these Central California countries for more than 90 days. We'll get a new visa, and we'll come right back in September. So that's what we decided while we were staying at this place this last week. So a lot of things had to be done. We had to get health certificates for the cats to travel into Belize. And from Belize, we can go into Cancun, to Mexico, figure out where to stay, where to store the van near Cancun, buy airplane tickets, figure out how to fly. So now we're driving north, and we have about 2 weeks before our plane flies out of Cancun to go to LAX. A few days to drive up, go through the border crossings, and get back into Mexico. But it is hot. Playa del Carmen has a lot of cheap Airbnbs. It's not Tulum or Cancun. It's less of a, well, it's a very touristy place. I think we can get an Airbnb for like $300 a week for all of us. This place is just north of the town of Coban in Guatemala. It's only about 150 miles, maybe 180 miles from Antigua, but it took us forever to get here. This place is called El Refugio. Really beautiful place, right by the river. They got a couple of like shades over here, a couple of swimming pools that are not filled, and there's an outdoor shower. All this water that they use for this comes from the river. There's no crocodiles, but there's supposed to be quetzales here. That's the currency and the national bird of Guatemala, but we haven't seen any. It's probably like 90% humidity right now. It's not all that hot, maybe in the 80s during the day, cooler at night, but the humidity is what gets you.
This is your first day in hotness, Luca. What do you think?
It's hot.
You're making a lot of faces.